Coming to you from WPFW here in Washington, D.C., here with the 8th episode of From the Browder File. As always, I'm pleased to have this opportunity to connect with you, to talk to you about history and culture and things that are so critically important to our well-being. Today's program is a very special program. We do know that today is the day that commemorates the birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King, a drum major for justice, peace. I'm going to shift gears a little bit today and not talk about Dr. King because he has been talked about on numerous shows today and will continue to be talked about over the course of the next week or so. I would like to focus our attention today on another drum major for peace and justice. I'm talking specifically about our beloved sister, our beloved ancestor, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, who left us 9 years ago on the 2nd of January. So today's show is going to be dedicated to the life and the legacy of Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. And what better way to start off today's show than to hear from Dr. Welsing herself. So let's sit back and reflect on the words and deeds of this mighty, mighty ancestor.
Huge problem of racism. This man had found the key that we're dealing with a total system. So then from that point, I started wondering, well, why would a group of people who call themselves white, why would they set up such a system on this planet? Not in Washington, D.C., on this planet. And one day I was in my apartment, washing dishes, cooking, and the brain computer came with a printout. And I started thinking, see, if you put a question in your mind, why? You were telling your brain computer, bring in data to answer the question. And little children magically understand that. Because when they're 2 and they begin to start talking and thinking, and they keep saying, why? Why? You see, and the grown-ups get annoyed, but the child is trying to understand cause and effect on this planet, in this world that they have been brought into. So I have been saying, but why would they do it? Mr. Fuller would say, Francis, it's not important. Why? Just learn what they do. But I was still as a psychiatrist, but why would they do it? So I started thinking about some of the things that people who classify themselves as white would say about Black people. The first thing, they were always saying that they were genetically superior to us. How many people remember hearing that? Like all the time. So I thought about that. The other thing that I thought about was they referred to the people of color on the planet, the Black, brown, red, and yellow people, all of them having pigmentation due to the Black pigment melanin, that they were minorities. And so I started thinking, wait a minute, in other words, I've been in their schools a long time. Number one, they are a tiny minority. They are fewer than 1/10 of the people on this planet. Instead of Black people being genetically inferior, Black people are genetically dominant to people who classify themselves as white. The ability to produce the Black pigment that causes our skin to have coloration is a genetically dominant trait. If anybody doesn't understand what I'm talking about, all you have to do is think about our president, Barack Obama. His mother was white. His father was Black. Black is a genetically dominant trait. White is a genetic recessive trait. A dominant plus a recessive always equals a dominant. So there's no way a white person plus a black person is gonna get a white person. They had an opportunity on all the plantations to study that for hundreds of years. We've never come up with anything other than a shade of black.
Those were the words of Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, a warrior, scholar, scientist, and intellectual who spoke truth to power and spoke those truths for most of her life. So we're going to be honoring the life and the legacy of Dr. Welsing this afternoon. And I can't think of a better way to honor her memory than to have as our special guest a sister who has devoted a considerable portion of her life as a drum major for peace and justice, and who is a protector of Mother Earth and all of its inhabitants, who studied with Dr. Welsing and is carrying the torch for her as we do what we, the living, know to do to keep the memory of our ancestors alive. Our special guest today is Sister Sabrina Johnson. Sister Sabrina, how are you?
Peaceful greetings. I'm still learning.
All right, where have I heard those phrases before? Still learning. And what are you learning, my sister?
Yes, still learning. You've heard that from Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., who, as Dr. Welsing noted in her remarks that you played earlier, was the person who presented to her the idea that racism is a system, a global system, the system of white supremacy. And Mr. Fuller was always noted by Dr. Welsing as being a genius level person. He provided that context, and with her essential question of why, as a psychiatrist needing to find answers to help her patients be well, asking the question why, she gave us the other dimension of understanding the system of racism, white supremacy. What motivates it? What motivates the behaviors that we see on the part of people who classify themselves as white and those that they classify as non-white worldwide? We see it consistently across all of the geographies, across centuries. And we have now for us the work to do to replace the system of white supremacy with the system of justice. And we have the keys to the colors, thanks to Dr. Welsing and Mr. Fuller. And you'll recognize Keys to the Colors as the subtitle of Dr. Welsing's seminal work, her collection of essays, the ISIS Papers, and the subtitle being The Keys to the Colors. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to, well, you can come back to me, but I do want to explain where that subtitle came from because.
Okay, we'll get into that, but I want to focus for a few minutes on this idea of racism and this concept of white supremacy being a system. Dr. Welsing said in the clip that I just aired that white people, or people designated as white, non-melanated people, represent less than 1/10 of the population of the planet. But they have convinced the 9/10 of the people of the planet who are people of color that they are the minority. And the real minority is the majority. So it had to have taken numerous types of systems to brainwash the world into believing something that that is not real. Let me just ask you for a second to call upon your experience as an engineer. And engineers deal with systems. So what type of system was engineered in order to brainwash the world into believing something that our eyes were telling us is not true?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a system, meaning it's all encompassing. The system that was constructed was a behavioral system. And as its roots, its pillars are deception and violence. And you're just talking about how we, those who are classified as non-white, by those who classify themselves as white under this system of white supremacy. We have become convinced of a number of things that are just outside of reality. We've been convinced through deception and through violence, through various sectors of human activity, particularly religion.
Now, Dr. Welsing referenced 9 areas of human activity. Can you share with us those 9 areas where these systems are operational 24/7, 365?
Yes, yes. Economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. And again, this is a framework that was part of Mr. Fuller's early thinking. And Dr. Welsing, again, enhanced that and amplified it and gave the meaning of why. It's when there are things that are difficult to believe or people want to reject the reality, once you understand why, what drives a behavior, it becomes easy to understand and to accept as reality. So all of the, I guess you could call them subsystems, were attended to very, very carefully by people who classify themselves as white. So they have a way of operating their thoughts, their speech, their action, meaning people who classify themselves as white, what they do and what they don't do, what they say and what they don't say in all of those areas to non-white people. And it's backed up by all kinds of deceptive practices, all kinds of corruption, and also violence.
So let me ask you then, if racism, white supremacy is a system, then the only way that that system could be overturned is by creating an equally powerful system that can be infused into all 9 areas of human activity. So what would that opposing system or corrective system look like in your mind's eye?
Yeah, that would be a counter-racist system, a system of justice. And it's something that has never been established on planet Earth at all. And a lot of people who are, as we term it in the counter-racist science framework, victims of racism, white supremacy, um, meaning non-white people, people who are subject to it. All people, because it's a global system, who are non-white are subject to it, no matter your income level, your status, all of that. But a lot of people, a lot of non-white people, reject the notion of there being white supremacy because of the words. And let me stop and say, both Dr. Welsing and Mr. Fuller have been extraordinarily keen, precise, and diligent about teaching us the importance of words, the definitions of words, understanding them, and using them as a tool towards your goal objective, as opposed to letting words and the concepts that they bring dominate us. As you noted, we've been convinced that we as non-white people are minorities. Black people in the US or the concept called America, all over the world, etc. But it's been backed up by things like maps, of the Mercator map and then the Peters projection map that made corrections to what was presented as larger land masses where that's more populated by people who classify themselves as white, and a diminishment of the size and the populations in places like Africa, South America, et cetera, et cetera. So you have implements and educational resources that are backing up the mentality of people who classify themselves as white so that they can project that they are something that they are not, because they are keenly aware that they are deficient. Their deficiency is in color and the ability to produce color. And through that, we have this fear of white genetic annihilation. As you noted, Black plus white equals color. And so if the world's populations were able just to interact as as things might just unfold without a system of mistreatment, control, and domination that we have, given that people who classify themselves as white are genetically recessive in terms of skin coloration,
Sure.
they would disappear. Just like when you put a couple of drops of chocolate syrup in a glass of milk and stir it up, the white milk is gone.
Right. But let me ask you a question to that point. You were talking earlier about the power of words. And I've heard people who weren't really rooted in the philosophy, the teachings of Dr. Welsing or Mr. Fuller, take exception to the use of the term white supremacy. So how would you counter that argument? Since words have meaning and power, and if you say white supremacy, then it suggests subconsciously that you're giving your power to the white minority on the planet. How would you address those questions?
Yes, that surfaces a lot, even in people who are, progressive and really African centered in their thinking. There's an automatic reaction, a startled and a rejection of the term white supremacy because people are thinking that that means we're saying white people are innately superior. We're not saying that at all, but we're acknowledging the reality that they are in the supreme position. They are in the superior position. Just as if you were in a situation where a person who's incarcerated, that person could have 3 PhDs, an MD, a Nobel Prize in physics and chemistry, a JD, and be an inmate. And the warden might have a GED.
Sure.
But he's in the superior position because he can come and go as he wants. He can do whatever he wants to, and he is versus the person who's incarcerated. He's brilliant. He's of great character, et cetera, et cetera. But the positioning is such that there's a superior position and an inferior position, but it has nothing to do with the innate qualities or anything that has been cultivated in terms of character and intellect and that sort of thing. And we have to really embrace that reality. And Mr. Fuller often uses the construct of thinking of us as a prison camp, and we are inmates we're prisoners of war in a prison camp. And that feels harsh. And it's something that a lot of people, Black people particularly, would reject. I'm free. I can come and go. I got a car. I got a job. I got a house. But we're all subject to the system of white supremacy, which means it's not just about what we can lift up in a few examples of like a few Black billionaires or people with this status and that level of so-called fame. But we're all still subject to the system of white supremacy, and the masses of Black people are suffering at great levels all over the world. And it's going to get ratcheted up given the political dynamic here in this so-called concept called America, as well as globally.
Sure, sure. Well, listen, you have taken on the banner, you've taken on the responsibility of keeping Dr. Welsing's legacy alive. When did you meet Dr. Welsing? What prompted you to become so enamored of her work and such that you would dedicate a considerable portion of your time to travel with her, to study with her, and now that she's gone, to work tirelessly to keep her memory alive? What was it about Dr. Welsing that drew you to her and planted this mission? Actually, to use Dr. Welsing's words, Dr. Welsing often talked about the fact that everyone had a global assignment, something that they were born to do. And I would say, if you will allow me, Sabrina Johnson, that your global assignment is to make sure that the world remembers Dr. Welsing, that she is never forgotten. How does she touch your soul?
Hmm. Thank you for that question. Yeah, and it started a long time. I think the seeds of it started but way before I met her in my own childhood. I grew up in a small town in South Carolina. Actually, all towns in South Carolina are small, but but anyway, I was
Now,
in
well, look, you can't drop that and keep moving. What town in South Carolina was that now?
Aiken.
Aiken. And Aiken is the hometown of what scholarly giants?
Oh, John G. Jackson.
And Chancellor Williams.
And Chance. Oh, yeah, yes.
Absolutely.
And
Okay.
James Brown is from around that area too.
Around the corner. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But at any rate, I was fortunate to grow up in what I call a Black cocoon. And it was wonderful, protective in a time when, all Black adults were your parents.
Mm-hmm.
And there was messaging that was consistent. Um, and, we didn't lock our doors. We could go shopping and throw 7 bags of things we bought in the backseat of the car with the windows rolled down and go for another 3 hours somewhere and never even think about it, et cetera, et cetera. So there was that cocoon, but just outside of it, there was treachery. And I was in I learned that in the classroom early on, from kindergarten on, um, that people who classify themselves as white, even when it's an adult versus a very young child, they are brutal in their mistreatment, in their trying to degrade you and undermine your greatness as a Black child. So I had questions about that. And a pivotal event happened when I was in junior high school. Um, a friend of mine, classmates' father was lynched.
Mm. And
And
what year was this?
this was about 77
Mm.
or so. And I was stunned. Um, his body was found hanging very close to where I lived and where we used to play,
Mm.
wooded area. And I couldn't believe, I couldn't understand why all of the adults to me weren't doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, they were just things moved on the next day and the next day and the next day.
They accepted it as the status quo, I assume.
Well, it was ruled through a 20-minute investigation
Let me
that
guess, a suicide?
yes,
Yes, yes, yes. That's the
yes,
standard response to those types of atrocities.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I was outraged, and in my own little way of protesting, I stopped speaking to my parents for a couple of days. And so then, my mother sat me down and really talked to me about reality,
Mm-hmm.
and the reality that what we do or what we don't do has to have our future and our own protections in mind. Um, and our in terms of our family, our responsibility is to take care of you, our and your siblings to um, and cultivate your development. Now the NAACP was involved, et cetera, et cetera. But it really um, I concluded at that young age that wow, um, no one really can protect me because that could have been my daddy, that could have been
Mm-hmm.
someone else, and I'm going to have to be as self-sufficient as I can, and I want to understand why that happened and why the response was the way it was, which I thought was insufficient.
That's a powerful story, Sabrina. Thank you for sharing that with me. It takes me back to my childhood in Chicago in 1965 when Dr. King had moved his protests to Chicago and was attempting to integrate Marquette Park on the near south side. And he was accosted by white folk and was hit in the head with a brick as he was trying to enter his home one evening. And Dr. King said that he's faced all kinds of racism in the South, but he had never faced the type of racism that he was confronted with in Chicago. And as a young child living in Chicago, hearing about this animus towards Black people by whites, I couldn't understand it. It rocked my world. So yeah, you had the same feeling a decade later, right? And so how did that incident open the door for you to fall in love with the message of Dr. Welsing?
Okay, there are a couple more steps along the way. So I I think my reaction to that was such that, okay, you know, adults don't really all have it right.
Mm,
I was open to um, criticizing or at least evaluating things that are presented to me. And so, it kind of opened my eye just a little bit. And when I looked around, I saw more things that were contradictory or just, didn't make sense or weren't right, especially in the church.
mm, mm.
Now, I
Religion is one of those 9 areas, isn't it? Mm-hmm.
yes, yes. And I'm thankful for my upbringing, and there was a lot of support and just tremendous assistance that I received in my own development by people who were Black people who were in the church.
Sure.
And so I appreciate that, and I never want to diminish or downgrade that. But I began to see inconsistencies between what was preached
Mm,
and what was happening.
mm-hmm.
And so the more and more I questioned that, what people were doing, and then I started questioning what people were presenting to me in terms of just the content of the Bible. There were things that were to me just totally contradictory.
Sure.
That, that doesn't make sense. If that doesn't make sense. And then I think the teenage years of, defiance, and you want to be think for yourself and you're tired of people, bossing you around, telling you what to do and all of that. So that fire of defiance kind of amplified things. And when I saw, a very overt and huge contradiction between, let's say, how do I say this? The preacher and somebody who wasn't his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw the reaction to that. Um, I had the attitude, y'all can't tell me nothing.
Okay. Okay. Again, your story so closely parallels my story in Chicago, growing up in Chicago, and seeing the same contradictions in the church, seeing misbehavior on the part of the pastor who tells you what to do, but he can do whatever he wants to do. Yeah, these contradictions are begging for answers, as Dr. Welsing said in the clip in the beginning. You want to know why? Why is this happening? Why aren't you saying something or doing something to correct what you know is inappropriate action? So yeah, I think we all have experienced that to some point. But Dr. Welsing obviously gave you something that you could build a foundation on to answer those whys and
Mhm.
and move into the world with greater clarity as to who you were as a woman.
Yeah, yeah. And there's one more kind of pivotal, contradictory point or question that just didn't make sense in my head that I had in my probably late teens, early 20s, reading more about Black history, and just thinking about within the enslavement system, plantation activities. you know, Knowing that people who classify themselves as white were mistreating Black people terribly, horribly, terroristically, worse than they would treat animals. And I was just thinking about the white female who would pass on her baby
Mm.
to a Black woman to nurse, to care for, and do all of the things that cultivate bonding, even between a mother and a child, a baby.
Can I hold you for 1 second and just let our listeners know that you're listening to the Browder File here on WPFW. My guest today is Sabrina Johnson, and we're discussing the life and the legacy um, of Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, how her writings, how her speeches, how her life has impacted us on a personal level. So, Sabrina, continue, please.
Yeah, so I was like, here you are brutally mistreating somebody, yet handing them your baby, the most precious thing in your world, to care for them, to nurse, to all of these things. It did not make sense. It was
But
such.
wait a minute now, on a psychological level, if someone who has been abusing you for centuries gives you their child to care for, obviously that means on a subconscious level in their mind, they know that you are the protector, you are the nurturer, you have what they don't have.
Mhm.
So you
Yeah,
learning
yeah,
to see those things that are unspoken is critically important to process in this world in which we live.
absolutely. But my teenage mind hadn't taken me there
Okay.
yet. But when I heard Dr. Welsing and her framework, and also just observing her manner,
Hmm.
serious,
Yes, always
calm,
calm.
listening, responding in a way that reflects thought
Hmm.
and pre-existing analysis and courage. It was just like, wow. So the way she presented herself and then the content, it all made sense. Everything, you know, there was so much. I had done well academically in school, throughout school. And, it was just very difficult because most of my teachers were white.
Of course.
And, from just incident after incident after incident after incident, um, of trying to degrade me or to even mark my papers wrong when my answer is wrong when everybody else's with the same answer was right,
Mm,
et
mm,
cetera, et cetera. All kinds of things.
sure.
But seeing a framework that described and explained all of this behavior, it just made sense. And so, had always been interested in science, and I studied engineering. So it's a very, logic,
Mm.
uh, formulated way of approaching problem solving.
Sure, sure, sure. But listen, before we let time get away from us,
Okay. Okay.
because it's after the bottom of the hour, I want to know when you first met Dr. Wilson. When did you first meet her, and what was that interaction like? And then I'm going to ask you to set up this clip that you sent me of Dr. Wilson talking about the telephone call she received from the FBI.
Okay. Yeah, I met her. I had gone to the National Black Holistic Retreat,
Mm.
which had been an event established by Brother Hakeem Madbuti, David Hall, and uh, six or seven other brothers who, which is a wonderful, wonderful event that addressed um, the political, cultural, historical, nutritional, um, relational, between males and females, all those dynamics that we as Black people needed to really work on and get together,
Mhm.
and uplift. And the ISIS Papers was
Oh,
originally published by
okay. Yes,
Hakeem.
Third World Press. Yes.
Yeah, Yes, yes, and he in fact encouraged Dr. Welsing to um, aggregate her essays that she had provided to the National Medical Association conferences over the years into a publication, and that there we had the ISIS papers, and the ISIS papers was presented for sale, and I read it, and I think I had seen her on the Phil Donahue show.
Mm.
It was later at another uh, Black holistic retreat, I think, that I first met her. And I was living in Boston at the time, and she came and she was invited to speak and do a presentation there. And that really set things off. And then my DC connection. I came to DC a lot and back and forth. And I think you probably told me, she's doing these regular sessions, and so I tried to coordinate my trips to DC so that I could go to the institute. So it goes way back, and once I heard it, and it just made crystal clear, perfect sense, and I saw the value of having that understanding to guide me in my various situations, also working in a workplace environment that was even more treacherous than my educational environment growing up in terms
Hmm.
of white supremacy, chokehold. So it gave me sanity, and helped me um, speak up and defend myself and to fight when there was a need to do so. And that, expanded to my having that viewpoint and that kind of a mission in my professional life to uplift communities that are historically marginalized when it comes to environmental racism.
Sure. So you said you were going to explain the keys to the color. I think this is the
Oh,
perfect time.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
Give us
yes.
your interpretation.
So again, Dr. Welsing was a psychiatrist, general psychiatrist and child psychiatrist, which means that generous listening is
Mm.
her middle name, and very calm, and a desire to understand, a desire to understand, a desire to understand. And she was working, and there was a person who was, I think, referred to her sort of in an immediate way. He was sort of outside and um, ranting and raving and just going on and on. And there was an opportunity to, see if she could be of assistance to this person who was obviously in some mental distress. So she sat down and talked to him, and in taking the patient history, she listened very clearly, and he was babbling and rambling and saying things that weren't really connecting, shall we say. But she continued to listen, and at one point he said he had a lucid moment,
Mm.
although she diagnosed him as um, paranoid schizophrenic. Um, he said at one point, Doc, if we could just figure out the keys to the colors. And that snapped with her.
Mm.
She always remembered that, and it really impacted her, um, because, and it's to me a metaphor. All out of all of the insanity, there, the truth is there.
Mm.
Truth is there, and it
Always below the surface. You just have to, yeah,
yeah,
listen
connect
for it
with
and
it.
bring it out.
So the ISIS papers, the keys to the
The
colors.
colors. Well, I want you to set up this clip you sent me of Dr. Welsing talking about this phone call she received from the FBI. Give us a framework for this short piece.
Yeah. So, she went to a lot of conferences related to the medical associations she was involved with, etc. And of course, by this time she had written well, let's see, it's right around, her time of writing the Cress theory of color
That would
confrontation.
have been the early 70s then.
That would have
About
been
70,
1970.
70,
But
70,
this was,
74.
I mean, she was cultivating that, but this would have been 1969 when this call occurred, because
Mhm.
she got a call from, you know the men in suits, so to speak,
Mhm.
and said, Dr. Welsing.
Well, look, don't let, let her
Okay,
say it.
okay,
Yeah, let her
okay.
say it. All right. And it's appropriate that you sent me this piece because it centers around Dr. King.
Yes, yes, yes.
Let's on the day of his birth, let's listen to this clip where the FBI called on Dr. Welsing for some assistance regarding something that they feared was going to happen uh, regarding Dr. King's death. So let's hear this short clip. It's about 2 minutes.
The FBI called me one time. It was right before Martin Luther King's assassination. Mind you, called me when I was on Fairmount Street. Called me one morning, must have been 9:15. Dr. Welsing, this is the FBI. Why are you calling me? Well, we wanted to talk to someone who had their finger on the pulse. Finger on the pulse of the Black community. And I said, well, what does that really have to do with me? Well, you taught a course at the New School of Afro-American Thought that used to be on 14th above you. And I said, and so, well, we'd like to know what is going to happen on Black Friday. I said, Black Friday? What is Black Friday? See, that's not language that Black people put together. What's Black Friday? Well, that's the anniversary of the assassination of Martin Luther King. I said, if anything happens, it's something that you guys have set up. And out of his mouth came, you're thinking about the CIA. Now that was, see, he was some young guy who must have been given the assignment. He wasn't supposed to say that. Because the CIA wasn't supposed to be operating domestically. So I said, look, it'll be some of you guys that set it up. If anything is supposed to happen, it'll be something you all will have structured. Well, if you hear anything, will you please call us? Clicker, no, don't be absurd.
Dr. Welsing frequently dropped jewels like this at her monthly talks at Howard University. She conducted those talks for over 31 years. And now that she's gone, there's a void. We're still dealing with the problems that she dedicated her life to analyzing and discussing. But now that Dr. Welsing is gone, what is your commitment to help ensure that we will understand what's at stake and our responsibility to help bring justice into our lives and into the world?
Yes, thank you for that critically important question. And what I am dedicated to doing is to helping people, meaning Black people, primarily Black people, but all non-white people, understand that we are dealing with a system of white supremacy and what it is and what it means and how it works. And so in the backdrop, we have Dr. Welsing's functional definition of racism, of white supremacy, of apartheid. And the value of this definition, it's not a slogan. It's not a couple of words. It's not some streamlined thing that you can zip over. It is comprehensive so that it both describes and explains the phenomena. And so it is my commitment to helping as many people as I can know, understand, and share this, the functional definition of white supremacy. We have to, we have to gain that level of understanding. Once you understand something, then you better know how to relate to it. And so I would really implore people to purchase the ISIS papers. In the back of the ISIS papers, The Keys to the Colors, her 1991 publication, is the functional definition. It's printed there along with her Black Oath and her Black prayer for liberation and peace and justice. So we want to support those who support us. So Brother Natty in Baltimore, his establishment, Everyone's Place, African Cultural Center, please call them. I know everybody wants a web presence, but please just phone Everyone's Place at 410-728-0877 to purchase the ISIS papers and make it your business to read, study, memorize, and share the functional definition. It's like the ABCs and the multiplication tables of language and mathematics. Is the basic structure, the framework that will help us think in our own best interest and help us relinquish the strong draws of distraction, of deception, and be able to see with clarity what it is that we must do, which requires a lot of discipline.
Sure, sure. And let me just ask you because you're saying something that is so fundamental and so basic that it should not have to be said. But the mere fact that too many of our people don't understand what's at stake and waste so much of their time involved in frivolous behavior. We're with this incoming administration. I can only imagine we're going to see some of the most difficult times that African Americans have ever faced in this country over the course of the next 4 years. So I would trust that moving forward with your working to keep Dr. Welsing's legacy alive, I would imagine that there will be some things that you will be doing to help those who are interested understand how fundamentally important it is to understand the keys to the colors so that we can move in lockstep with a system that will help liberate our minds and our bodies.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you for that as well. So next year will mark the 10th anniversary of Dr. Welsing's ascension into the ancestral realm. And so we'll be rolling out a web presence, a number of tutorials and events marking commemorative events, but not just commemorations, calls to action. We did those in a couple of the years prior to the pandemic, and we'll do a large scale one during the 10-year anniversary. And I just also want to note that because people desire and expect a web presence for everything. With my longstanding relationship with Dr. Welsing, I am dedicated to doing things in alignment and harmony with her estate. So that's why we've been slow to roll out a web presence and that sort of thing. There have been many other, you know, more mundane logistical estate-related things to deal with. So that's all coming. But in the meantime, again, purchase and read and study the ISIS papers and particularly the functional definition of white supremacy and share it with everyone in your circle.
You know what I would suggest, if I can be so bold, as we commemorate the 10th anniversary of the ascension of Dr. Welsing, I would like you to consider doing a discussion online of the book, the ISIS paper, highlighting cogent points and showing their relevance to 2025 or 2026 when you'll be doing this. I would love to see that because I find myself amazed as I interact with different people, particularly during the recent holidays, how much basic information is unknown. So many people have never heard of Dr. Welsing, have never heard of Dr. Clark or Dr. Hilliard or others. So there is a vacuum now that needs to be filled with people such as yourself who are going to make certain that certain scholars, some of our heroes and sheroes, are not forgotten. And I think it should be done, it could best be done in a structured way where we do have a presence online and we take people who are ready to receive these messages step by step through certain concepts and ideas so that those who are ready to get it will get it. Right? And then
Yes,
we can guide them towards what they should be doing once they get it. Because it's not simply about reading a book or talking about Dr. Welsing. As I understand it, she dedicated her life to this message. And she was constantly on point, never deviating throughout the decades. She never deviated one iota. So there's a message there, there's a spirit there that has to continue to be lifted up and passed forward to the generations that have never heard of Dr. Welsing. I would really encourage you to do that, and whatever I can do to assist you in that endeavor, I'm willing to do because, as you well know, Dr. Welsing meant the world to both of us.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely, and that's a part of it. And we have so much evidence in the news day by
Mm,
day by
mm,
day to illustrate precisely what was laid out decades ago that remains unrefuted because it is the truth.
mm.
And it is the truth that will deliver us to a system of justice and so that we can live in peace. And I just want to say one thing, speaking of current events, please, everyone, go see or check it out online or in a few select theaters, or even purchase the DVD or Blu-ray of Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat. It is a documentary film centering around the story of Patrice Lumumba, but it is the white supremacy playbook laid out for you, impacting all those 9 areas: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. We see how the system of white supremacy operated and operates now. Please see that. Also,
What's the name of the film again, Sabrina?
Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat.
The soundtrack to a coup d'etat. So listen, we're going to do this. I want you to hold on because we're just about out of time with the show, but we're gonna go over a bit. So I like for you to sit tight for a minute so that I can wrap up my time here on air, and we're going to continue this discussion. And for those who want to hear the continuation of our discussion, they can go to the Browder File YouTube channel and get some extra information about Dr. Welsing and why her life is so important and why we've dedicated this show to lifting her up. We are. I just got a message here that from the interim general manager of WPFW that they're going to be presenting that film soon in the very near future. So we will certainly let you know. We will have a WPFW night where we'll ask everybody, as who was that used to say Lottie Dottie and everybody? We'll ask everybody to come out and attend that film. And then we should have discussions, ongoing discussions about the significance of that film and its relevance in our lives right now. Because COINTELPRO never ended. It never stopped. And so we have to be aware of the forces of opposition to us having this quality of dialogue, these attempts to lift ourselves up and prepare the future generations to move forward with these legacies standing on the shoulders of these heroes and sheroes. So we've got to become more active now than at any point in our life. So let me wrap up with you, Sabrina, because my time is just about up. I want to thank you so much, but don't go anywhere because we're going to continue this conversation in a few minutes. This is Tony Browder. This is the Browder File Show. This is my 8th show. And I'm beginning to get into the groove. As I shared with a couple of people, it's much easier to be interviewed than to interview, right? So I'm learning the ropes, and I'm so pleased to have the opportunity to share with my listeners, friends and colleagues and subject matters that are important to me and that I want to also make sure that they're important to you. This is information that we have to safeguard. It's important to our well-being. And these next 4 years will remind us how important it is to gather together as community, how important it is for us to understand the keys to the color, how important it is for us to understand the power of love. You know, during Dr. King's time, I couldn't understand this idea of loving your enemy, but now that he's gone and now that I'm more mature, I have a better understanding of what love is and how that love should be expressed to each other, because it strengthens us and it allows our ancestors to work through us to help us do the work that we have dedicated our lives to do. And that's the reason why I end every show playing the music of my favorite group, Earth, Wind, and Fire, playing one of my favorite songs of my favorite album, That's the Way of the World. We talk about, it's all about love. And it's love that comes from the heart. It's love that is as old as time itself. It's love that will ground you in a sense of knowledge, in a sense of well-being, in a sense of protection. And when you're in that space, you know, you can feel, you can feel the love, you can feel the thoughts, you can feel the energy from those that have fought for us, who have lived for us and who have died for us, reaching out to us, letting us know everything is going to be all right. We just need to hold on, be strong, and carry the messages into the future. This is Tony Browder. I look forward to seeing you next week with another exciting show from the Browder File. All right, so that's the end of this segment, and we're going to go into a little overtime. And I got a couple of questions I do want to ask you about Dr. Welsing. Share with me one of your favorite Dr. Welsing moments.
Okay.
I know there's many, but share with me one of your favorite.
Yeah. Okay. One of them was I was at work. This was in the late 90s during the Clinton administration. And there was like a 3-page front page report in the Washington Post about Clinton and Monica Lewinsky.
Hmm.
And I remember I was at my office and it was probably close to 6 or after 6 o'clock. And I'm reading, and the news article was rather explicit. And it talked about Bill Clinton using a cigar.
Yep. A Cuban cigar, I might add.
And I was like, what? So I called Dr. Welsing, who, and she was so dedicated, she framed her working hours in accordance with the population she serves. So she was in her office quite late.
Sure.
I said, Dr. Welsing, I know you're busy and whatnot, but if you have even 5 minutes this evening, I'm going to print out this because there was a transcript of the information that was mentioned in the news article. But you got to read this. You got to read this. And I took it over to her office and we paged through everything. And it was like, wow. Because well, those who are familiar with Dr. Welsing's work in the ISIS papers knows her attention on the male genitalia and its importance in all of the dynamics that we see on both sides of the chessboard, both black and white, so to speak. So yeah, that was a moment. I remember her, you know, so she would have gatherings at her home from time to time. And she would invite a few students from the institute. And so we'd cook and, like 6 hours, 8 hours. And so I started doing the same thing, inviting her and Mr. Fuller, particularly to view the interview that I did with the white woman, Farrell Winfrey, at one of the Race Relations Institutes, where she really laid it out very truthfully about what white people say and do and think. And I remember in one of those sessions, and we do it, I always do it on the Sunday before the Martin Luther King holiday, Justice Weekend gathering. Anyway, Mr. Fuller, who is the most serious and very sort of he's on a different path, thinking wise.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, genius, genius, genius. But he's also hilarious. As serious as he is, he's hilarious. And he said something about his early life, and Dr. Welsing was laughing to the point of tears and just almost falling off my couch. I remember that moment. There have been so many moments, so many aha moments at the Institute, because, as much as Dr. Welsing read, and she read multiple newspapers every day, journals, magazines, everything, right? But she couldn't read everything. And once students were attuned to the analysis, then we would see things, even when they weren't explicit, in imagery, in ads, in commercials, in um, uh, all of those things, right? And so we bring things to her attention um, in the way of almost show and tell, evidence of something that she had talked about. So she delighted in that. Sometimes there was a young man who was a great scout. He'd find things, evidence of things. And of course, she doesn't read or look at like Playboy and Hustler and all of that. But someone brought in one of those magazines, and there was an image that precisely depicted what she had been talking about in the ball games,
Okay.
football particularly.
Big brown, little white, right?
Yes, 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 yes. But just the delight that she took in, having things, not that she needed confirmation, but the ability for others to see with those kinds of analytical eyes and present to her things that happened, and all of the problem solving that happened at the Institute, because people would, share a situation, a workplace, a family situation, things that they observed, driving down the road or whatever the case may be, all evidence, and another sort of piece of the systemic puzzle. Um, I really appreciated those moments with her.
And now all we have a memory, right? All we have a memory. Yeah, I appreciate what you're doing to preserve her memory and make sure that her history, her legacy isn't distorted, I meant to share this with you a while ago. I haven't been able to get any additional information, but I was told about a month or so ago that Tariq Nasheed was doing a documentary on Dr.
Mm.
And I am interested to see if that is happening and how he will portray her because you know she was in what 3 or 4 of his Hidden Color series, and I recall at an event that was held in Chicago. I think it was about 20 maybe 2013 or 2014. There was an educational conference in Chicago, and they wanted to honor Dr. Welsing. And I suggested that they bring in Dr. Newton to present the award to Dr. Welsing. And she was there with her 2 sisters. So that was the last time I saw the 3 of them together. And during that time that during the conference, they had wanted to air some of Hidden Colors 2. It was either 2 or 4. I don't remember, but they wanted to air some of Hidden Colors, and I objected to that. I was telling the leadership I objected to that because, I had some concerns about Tariq Nasheed, who he was and what he was doing, and I had a conversation with James Small before I agreed to sit down and be interviewed for Hidden Colors 2, and was hoping, as James said, maybe the creator, maybe the ancestors are using Tariq Nasheed to produce these programs to get a message out to our people. Maybe this is what he was born to do. This is his cosmic assignment. And I agreed to do the interview because I wanted to believe that he was going to do good. But then when I saw the other side of Tariq Nasheed, that he was still doing the nonsense, and it troubled me to the point where I wouldn't do any more program. And I knew that Dr. Welsing wasn't aware of this. So I shared with her what I saw and what others had brought to my attention about Tariq's behavior. And she told me that she was going to have a conversation with him to resolve that issue. And I never had an opportunity to check in with her to find out if, in fact, she had had that conversation. So
Mm.
I'm very concerned about how she's portrayed to those who know nothing about her. So we'll see, and we'll hope for the best. That's about all we.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that out because, yeah, I ran into a situation just a couple years ago. There was a Black female who was presenting herself and a few of her friends as, um, students, mentees of Dr. Welsing, that Dr. Welsing was their mentor.
Mm-hmm.
They were establishing the Cress Welsing Institute on the second
Really?
floor of the stadium. Yes, and this is a chick with blonde locks who
Okay.
had been on the cows, the context of white supremacy show. By the way,
Mm.
I put a pin in that because I want to go back to highlight cows and
Mhm.
producejustice.com. But
Okay.
um, it's a person who never even met Dr. Welsing. She was
Sure.
doing things like having white people meet Black people events so that
Hmm.
they can know a Black person so they won't act the way they do.
Hmm.
She disputed Dr. Welsing's definition, et cetera, et cetera. I'm saying all that to say um, there are distortions out there, and part
Okay.
of what I want to do in my work leading up to the 2026 is to kind of curate the nonsense and be able to point it out as being not authentic
Mm-hmm.
and lift up what is authentic and who is really doing work that is reflective of her
Good.
and
Wonderful.
who she is. And by the way, even while she was living, somebody had set up a Facebook page and was saying things, quote unquote, representing her.
Mm-hmm.
And you would think that once she contacted them and told them to stop, that would be it. She had to struggle. I mean, the person was defiant, et cetera, et
Sure.
cetera. And so we also know that in this climate, this political climate, the truth is being drowned,
Mm-hmm.
drowned out by a whole lot of disinformation and misinformation. So
Sure.
we have to, strategize how it is that we can, you know, put as much guardrails around what we know to be truth and who is trustworthy to
Yes.
protect the legacy. But that's
Yeah.
that's going to take a lot of work. And again, that's a piece of why I want to make sure everything's aligned well with the estate and their
Mm-hmm.
properties, because I'm not going to do anything that is not in harmony and
Sure. Sure.
jeopardy.
Yeah, I truly appreciate that, and know that that's how you operate. But I'm also um, well aware of the fact that COINTELPRO never ended, and that we are dealing with a form of COINTELPRO 2.0. There are people out here now who I feel very strongly are agents of the devil and sowing seeds of dissension. And one of the things that I've not figured out yet, I've had this discussion with a couple of people, is how do you out those persons? Or how can we have a discussion about what some people are doing so that we can begin to find ways to, if not hold them accountable and check their behavior, at least put them on notice, let the community know what's going on. And the delicate situation um, is doing that without getting caught up in this um, social media beatdown, because these folk are very good at using social media to besmirch a person's character. And, you know, in this environment, in this social media environment, the truth doesn't mean anything. People hold on to the lies, they hold on to whatever has the most likes. So we've got to find a way using the technology to put the truth out there and to call out those people who are being untruthful, and do it in such a way that those who are listening and who truly want to learn to better themselves can understand what's at stake. So yeah, and I do feel, I do know, I don't just feel this, I know that with 92 coming on board next Monday, we're going to see more misinformation on social media, in the news, all around us, and people are going to become more confused than ever before. So we've got our work cut out for us, and
Mhm.
we've got to work collectively. We've got to work intelligently to see to it that we are victorious.
Right. And part of it is to, we're not going to be able to unring the bell of online everythingness,
True.
but we also need to ourselves, meaning the older cadre, um, exercise some of the ways of the past, pre-technology, and teach that.
Mm-hmm.
Because to a lot of young people, they can't even imagine how we did things without a smartphone or without a navigation system, or being able to text someone and all of that. But look at all that was done,
Yeah.
up until the 90s, and real organizing of behavior of groups, et cetera, communication. Man, the communication is just, it's very hard to discern an avatar from a real person, and the technology is getting better and better. So as you know, we have to really be strategic in our thinking about how to best communicate effectively and have sort of layers of often ways to authenticate.
Mm-hmm.
who we are and who or what's what out there.
Well, I think there probably needs to be a conference or a series of meetings to discuss how to do that and how to do it effectively. And, you know, that may be a future show. So if you have any ideas, please pass them on. Sure.
Yeah, I'll definitely give that some thought about how to do that. A couple things I want to mention also.
Sure.
For people to do, trusted sources of information, etc., in the counter racist constellation. Of course, Mr. Fuller's web presence, producejustice.com, and there are archives of his weekly Tuesday 9 to 11 shows. He's dealing with a bit of a health challenge now, so he hasn't been on live the last few sessions, but all of those are archived from years. And you can also purchase his books, The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept and the Word Guide on the website. So that's a trusted source for people to gain an understanding of the system of white supremacy and counter-racist codification methods that we use to counter and produce a system of justice, and also POWs, context of white supremacy. Brother Gus T. Renegade. It's a radio blog show, and he interviewed Dr. Welsing some probably over a dozen or more times, probably in the maybe 2000, I don't know, maybe 9 or 10 to 2015, 14 range, somewhere in there. But he is a trusted person of understanding of her concepts and Mr. Fuller's, and is doing a lot of work to engage with people, invite questions, and present scenarios so that we have clarity about the system of white supremacy, what it is and how it works.
Good. Well, listen, thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show. And before we close, I want you to talk about this piece, "Perfect Black on the Nile."
Okay.
And then I'll play that, and we'll take some closing comments.
Okay. Well, thank you for the invitation. I appreciate the opportunity to share the ideas that we must embrace and carry forward. Thank you, Dr. Welsing and Mr. Fuller as well. So, Perfect Black on the Nile. You know, we all want to pay some tribute to someone who has made an impact on our lives, a tremendous impact in some way. We want to pay tribute to them. And with Dr. Welsing, looking at her and her naming her collection of essays, her publication, the ISIS papers, and what she said about um, that whole story about ISIS and the place that has come to be known as Egypt, and the story of Osiris, etc. It's obvious that she is really the embodiment of Aset Isis, because she has taken the fragmented pieces, meaning Black people and other non-white people all over the diaspora, and is bringing them back together with an understanding of what it is that we must do. I wanted to pay tribute to her in a way that connected that aspect of her and what she presented and represented in the world. So I was inspired to write this piece. Um, you know, Osiris was known as the Lord of the Perfect Black. And of course, with my love of water, the Nile certainly is the place of beginnings. So I was inspired to write this melodic, poetic tribute to Dr. Welsing, and it's sitting on top of or playing underneath it is The Nile by 2000 Black in homage to our great brother Mamadi Nyasuma, um, who was another strong and powerful brother who made a big mark in the DC area. So it all fit together. And so here we have
well,
Black
let,
Now.
well, let me just add a piece to that. Brother Mamadi was a master drummer, wonderful scholar, great father, beautiful human being. Mamadi went to Egypt with me in 1988.
Ah,
And it was that trip that inspired him to write On the Nile the following year.
ah.
So everything goes full circle. Everything goes full circle. So
Yeah.
let's listen to Your Perfect Black on the Nile, and then we'll close out.
Black on the Nile. We gathered in the blackness of night, quiet, calm, and solemn. Daddy and daughter, the doctor's doctor, joining the legacy keeper on the deep flowing water. Perfect black on the Nile. We journeyed to the place guided by natural satellite, bright fullness illuminating our path to honor our luminary mother's life. Perfect black on the Nile. 9 nations of Mother Africa connected by the Nile. 9 areas of major people activity, defined by Fuller with logic at every mile. To our healer, scholar, builder, counter warrior for justice, we'll never say goodbye. An ever-present bridge to understanding exactly why. Perfect black on the Nile. In flood, the Nile brings rich black fertile soil for sowing seeds of life and growth, while the Cress Welsing season of inundation dispenses black self-respect medication for the mind and for the soul. Perfect black on the Nile. Escorted like the beginning with parents at her side, all joined the flow up south, now on call to serve as guide. Perfect black on the Nile. For our resurrection, ancient, future, and now. Embrace the Cress theory and keys to the colors. Learn the why and the how. Out of stillness emerges movement. Out of quiet comes the music of resistance. Out of questions, we reveal solutions. Perfect black on the Nile. As above, so below, an astral map that we can see, the Milky Way, a celestial mirror reflecting the flow of the mighty Nile Riverway. Perfect black on the Nile. From light to crystal black, all the colors are fine, but most black, most beautiful. African genes, wear with pride. Perfect black on the Nile. Return to the source with grace, determined, quiet with much to say, embracing black, loving self, remembering the real Isis way, launching the era of justice on planet Earth and beyond. Perfect black on the Nile.
And that was Perfect Black on the Nile by my guest today, Sabrina Johnson. Sabrina, you're going to have to add poetess to your resume of accomplishments. I'm going to tell Danny Queen you're going to give him a run for his money.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. It's been great. It's been wonderful. So as you prepare for the 10-year anniversary of the ascension of Dr. Welsing, let me know how we can support you in any way. You have an open invitation to come back on the show to promote whatever activities you have planned for that commemoration. And I assume it will be a year-long commemoration, correct?
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Good. Well, thank you so much. Any parting words before we go?
Thank you. And as great as Dr. Welsing is, she's also accessible, meaning the things that she did, we can do too. Listen, embrace Black, be quiet, and know that we can enact what it is that we are determined to do if we're just serious and committed to producing justice.
Okay. Ashe. Hey. Peaceful greetings, Sabrina Johnson. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tony
And I
Brown.
look forward to talking with you soon, okay?
Likewise.
Okay.
Peace.
Yeah. Recording.